Hey, thank you. Thank you for coming out. Yeah, this is a film that Mai and I have made over the last year. It kind of, hopefully it shows you a bit of what you don't normally see behind, what really goes on for men. And I was just thinking, how am I feeling? I should probably tell you that. Someone asked me yesterday if I was feeling nervous. I wasn't yesterday. But Mélissa, who I've known for about 30 years, said you can tell when Jerry's nervous because he gets more and more laid back. So if I fall asleep, during the talk afterwards, I'm really freaking out. But no, I'm just really excited. This is amazing for me. This film's about a year old, and I never really thought we'd be standing here. I haven't been to New York for 20 years almost, so it's a real trip for me to be here. And yeah, thank you so much for hosting this. Thank you to Sebastian and Barbara for coming, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you, Mélissa, for just pushing us and promoting us and bigging us up for everything. So I'll hand over to Mai. Thank you.
Hey. Hello, everyone. So my name is Mai.for. I'm based in Paris. So it's the same for me. I haven't been here for quite a long time, and I'm very, very happy and very honored to be presenting this movie to you. Jerry has been running Men's Group for 25 years now in north of London. And I think that after Me Too, the idea emerged that he had to do something with what was going on with the men he has in his men's group, how to have a voice for these emotions to come out and to be shown at some point. And he began to film this man last year. And after a couple of months, he asked me to work on the movie with him. So I think I'm there because I've been making movies also. I have just finished another movie about women, about my line of women, so a very intimate project for 6 years. And just after I finished, I could be welcoming this new adventure about men. And I hope we will be able to discuss about that after the movie. So the idea for us is to host an experience for you, and I hope to trigger some magic altogether. So we're very, very honored to be initiating that tonight with you. Thank you very much.
I'm Mélissa Unger. You've met Jerry and Mai. I'd like to welcome Sebastian Unger, author and filmmaker, and Barbara Hammond, playwright. So Jerry, we'll start with you. First of all, thank you for the film, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of it, even in some small way. I think it's extraordinary, and I'm very happy to be here to help you sort of navigate this conversation. Thank you for having me. You've been running these men's groups for over 25 years. What made you feel that now was the time to make the discussions public?
Me Too was a background factor, but I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to why this. I was talking to you yesterday. I said I've been involved in various creative endeavors my whole life, really, and they usually feel like pushing a rock up a hill. And this one has felt like it's dragged me up the hill. So I think it's just of its time. It's like it's told us, come on, get this out there. So I don't think I can't explain it more than that. It just felt like we were holding a secret that I didn't want to be secret anymore. And I've been approached many times over the years by TV people, film people wanting to come and film groups. And I've always said no, simply because I don't think it's possible. I think the minute you bring a camera into a space like that, then you'd alter the dynamic. But in doing it ourselves, I realized there was a way to share it with the world in a way that felt very real and authentic.
So to that point, Mai, I wanted you to tell us a little bit and clarify about how this was filmed. So I was going to ask you what drew you to the project, but since Jerry teed up the filming, tell us a little bit about that, how that happened and how the filming happened, the difference between the some and what happened with the men.
So the guys wouldn't let me in. Okay, so it's a very delicate situation for these guys to open up this way, to go that deep, and being so honest and so true, and they wouldn't do that in front of a woman. So they decided to film themselves. And then we had this pilgrimage in the Somme, and I was filming, but they wouldn't talk. And I found it I felt very honored and very intimidated as much as they were. But I was very interested into the nonverbal, everything, all the emotions that were going on in this men's group, that they wouldn't say directly to me, but that was the clear friendship they would have, companionship they were searching for in this pilgrimage, and all the lineage with these warriors, these guys they didn't know personally. I was there for that, to show these things, the nonverbal.
Before I move on to Sebastian and Barbara, I just want to linger a little bit more with this and talk about what drew you to the project. When you were introducing the film, you told everyone that you had just completed a film about your family. It's called Les Rivières, which is rivers, and it is a wonderful film that I hope you'll get an opportunity to see at some point. And it traces the matriarchal line of Mai's family from her grandmother, her mother, herself, and her daughter. It's beautiful. I think it's very interesting that that happened, and then this happened sort of immediately after. So if you could just speak a little bit about how that was for you and that sort of dynamic.
I think any project is it's very organic. The way things happen in all these creative processes are very organic and very mysterious. I think the main thing for me is always to explore how ignorant I am. It was the case for Les Rivières. It took me some time to understand that, but that was the main thing. And when Jerry asked me to come on the project, I had so much resistance, and I had to really confront how much I didn't want to hear about these guys, how much I didn't want to hear how vulnerable they could go. A whole part of me was screaming, no, just protect us. Just protect me as a woman. I didn't want to see these images. I didn't want to hear about that. And then I thought it was so interesting for me to go on that journey, because I really needed to be nourished by these men, and to be confronted to my own limits. So so that's what it brought me, and I hope that what I brought to this project is a shape of. I think a documentary is really made on the editing. It's where you're in the flesh of the movie, and it was really bringing this project to life so that it could be shared.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting, your resistance and sort of the stereotype we have of what we expect men to be. Sort of a perfect segue to my question to Sebastian. Forgive me for being simplistic, but it's just for the sake of asking this question, is that your work in A Perfect Storm and in Restrepo sort of treats traditional macho masculine culture, if we're being reductive. I was curious about what you've learned about men from being on the front lines of that world, and what about this film resonated so deeply with you.
Yeah, so I would say for either sex, if you're doing something that's scary and dangerous, you're way better off not being in touch with your feelings, right? I mean, it just makes it harder. traditionally men are in jobs that are dangerous. So something like 96% of workplace fatalities are male, even though men are only 50% of the workforce. So there is a sort of logic in men shutting down their emotions because society does ask them to do 96% of the most dangerous work. But that engenders a problem, obviously, because eventually, as whether you're loggers or fishermen or soldiers or whatever, once you're past that dangerous time.
So hold your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Just
Once you
slide your hand a little above the white tape.
okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Once you're past that dangerous time, those emotions that you suppressed themselves become what's dangerous to you. So the trick for a healthy society is to encourage and inform men about how to shut down their emotions when they need to do that to act effectively, and then how to get in touch with those emotions later when they threaten to become toxic and dangerous to the men and to the society around them. And I studied anthropology in college. In a lot of small-scale traditional societies, there are very explicit rituals and ceremonies that are designed to bring men back particularly from war, and reincorporate them back into civilian life with women and children, older people that are vulnerable. And traditional societies know that this is something that has to be done consciously and deliberately, or it may not happen, and then the consequences can be very, very bad.
Hi, Barbara. Your plays often explore philosophical and interpersonal topics. So my questions to you are going to be a little bit more directed on how this film enables an opportunity for further discourse in a broader subject. I know you recently worked on a play about Pussy Riot, and I think that it's sort of interesting to have both you and Mai on the panel, because Mai just did a work on women, and Pussy Riot is also on women and women breaking stereotypes about women. So I'm curious, same question that I asked everyone, what was it that intrigued you about this film and made you want to be here tonight? And also, what do you see as sort of a broader macro philosophical opportunity for us here tonight?
And watching it again tonight, I was just so struck by how well you get to know these men over such a brief period of time, and how much they now live in my consciousness, the way the best characters do in a play. That's always an amazing thing, that you can see the beginning of a play, you start to get to know people, and by the end you're like, whoa, that's who they really are. It's a very different thing than what you originally thought. And I think one of the things that I've always wanted to do in my work is to defy expectations, and to show people that people aren't what they seem to be at first. And I don't think I can think of any work of art or documentary that I've seen that does that so with such laser focus as this film. It just takes you right into these men's hearts. And as I watched it the first time, I had to keep focusing on the film, because I kept thinking about the people in my life who I felt had to watch this film. You know, you just keep thinking about people who are confused and need young people who need help, men and women, but mostly guys, and guys with issues with their fathers and issues with their lives. And I think the bravery of the guys in the film is so intense that that's what drew. Like, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question exactly, but that's what my head is reeling a little bit again, watching these men again. And I think that that bearing it's not even about the secrets that they're telling. It's more, to me, their body language, the open close thing that they're doing. They're working to remain open, and I think we're all trying to do that. And so I think of it as a jumping off point, both to understand the people that are in the film and to begin a discussion about our inner selves, which is crucial to what I write about. So it just is incredibly attractive to me.
That makes sense. Thank you. It was exactly what I asked. Jerry, you once said something very interesting to me. You said that running men's groups is more about creating communities than fixing problems. And I think that's really interesting. Like, your approach to the therapeutic model is very interesting. So I'd love for you to talk about that a tiny little bit more. And Sebastian, after Jerry sort of touches on that, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the importance of belonging that you talk about in your book, Tribe. And so I think if you guys could both sort of just talk about that importance, community, belonging, and just expound on that notion a little bit and your different approach to therapy.
Yeah, I think isolation, men in isolation, that's when we get up to no good, you know, and you bring guys together. I mean, I envy Sebastian's instinct or intuition or interest that took him into anthropology, because the older I get, the more experienced I get, the more I'm looking at our tribal origins. And I think I've done this instinctively. You know, I was 25 years? I was young when I started doing this. And before that, I'd been in theatre and I'd put rock and roll bands together. So I've always been putting groups of people together. It's what I do best. And I think I feel like I'm following my own nature, which is pull people together, make them safe, make us accountable to each other, make us visible, create a space where people can talk without fear of being judged, so we can transcend the shame, the isolation, secrecy and shame go hand in hand, right? Excuse me. So I'm just trying to create a space where people can go beyond that, and I think it makes for a much safer world. And I think it's going back to our origins.
Makes sense. Sebastian?
Yeah, so humans are social primates, and humans die in nature immediately if they're alone. We survive and we thrive because we exist in groups. And that's true for men and women both. I think in modern Western society, there's more a tradition of women communicating with each other about their inner experience, their inner lives. And I think for men, there is much less of that, and maybe for some good reasons. I don't know. But I think that is how it has played out in our society, and I think that causes both sexes a different kind of pain. Sharing is also painful. It has its downsides. It can lead to higher risk of depression, for example. There is something about keeping your feelings out that actually can protect people from the consequences of really scary things. So neither sex has the secret. What I would say about men's groups in particular, though, we all need society, we all need people. The more adversity we face, the better we act, the closer we get to other people. That's true of men and women both. And people will look back on catastrophes like 9/11 or the Blitz in London with some real nostalgia. And what they're nostalgic about isn't the loss and the suffering and the tragedy. It's the closeness that those terrible things engendered in everybody because they needed each other to survive. But men's groups in particular, I'm not part of one, but I absolutely love this film because of what it reveals about men and about how people work in groups. I mean, these men obviously feel safe and to be revealing with each other. And when I was I was a war reporter for a long time, but towards the end of my career, I was actually with American soldiers for the first time in Afghanistan. I was with a platoon. It was about 30, 40 men. At a very small outpost on a ridge. It was completely cut off from the outside world, and there was an awful lot of combat. And it was very, very harsh out there in every conceivable way. And one of the guys out there said to me, sort of in amazement, he said, it's funny, there's guys out here who hate each other, but we'd all die for each other. Being willing to die for someone to protect them is one of the most intense forms of love. And I think men seek that security from each other, and they can't find it in a situation which isn't dangerous. They just have to take it on faith. Well, in combat, you don't have to take it on faith. People act that out every day. I might have been Margaret Mead who said something like, men invented war because they didn't have childbirth. I think they needed I mean, if you want to follow that logic, and perhaps she has a good point, they needed something that had life and death consequences and that made them absolutely connected to the people around them for their survival. And they came up with war. And, honestly, for all its destruction and tragedy and loss and horror, war does do that pretty well. It really does. And the survivors maybe get that from it. I mean, maybe that's the gold they come back with. And a friend of mine who's English, actually, whose father fought in World War II, I'll end with this. He said to me, he's a very troubled and occasionally violent man who's very unhappy with himself, has caused a lot of distress in his life, I think, because he hasn't gotten to the heart of some of these issues. But he knows they're there. And he said to me, there's nothing tougher than being the son of a soldier in peacetime.
I was going to ask my question, but I'm going to continue on that just for a second, because Jerry, we had talked yesterday about this very topic that Sebastian just brought up, and the one bit that we didn't get to with this is the context of rites of passage and the notion of war as a rite of passage. And I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
I mean, it was a very simple statement that came into my mind the other day, which is, I think, a culture without some kind of rite of passage, and I agree with Sebastian, there's probably some truth to, women have a rite of passage when they start menstruating, and they have a rite of passage when they give birth. There's nothing that says to a man, you're a man anymore. Historically, different cultures have always had some kind of ordeal where you're then qualified, and I don't think I felt qualified to call myself a man till I was probably 50, and I'd gone out and chosen some fairly fucking awful ordeals to test myself, because I'd labored under this thing. My father wasn't of a generation that fought, but my grandfathers were, and they were the men that I really respected, and my great-grandfathers. And I'd always lived with a kind of deep, gnawing fear that perhaps if you've not been to war, you can't be a man. And I would be terrified to go to war. So that was a conflict,
And I remember now the context in which we discussed it. It was why part of the film was set in the Somme, and how important and integral that is to the film, that it's the men's group and then the context of war with that. So having you both speak on that subject sort of answers the question why it was so important for you to have that footage. To broaden out the conversation a little bit with Mai and Barbara, Mai, we touched on the fact that you've been doing some work with women and now with men, and I know that one of your topics that you're really interested in is gender, right? And I wondered if you could, it's a little bit of a powder keg question because I don't want to go too deep into it, but you talked about the Me Too movement during your introduction. And I just wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about how this film lands in the context of that movement, and just a little broader question on gender and this role and how this could be a little polarizing or not at this time.
Yeah, it's very polarizing to be talking about gender. I think, to me, it was a very big question to what is a woman, or where is the woman within me? And when I was doing this first project, I came out with this kind of answer that was: a woman is a human who is an adult and who identifies to woman. And in this part, there is all the culture that goes into it, where, okay, how do I identify, why, etc., etc. And I think that the main thing that Me Too has brought up is singular situations, singular identities, where to be a woman can be something for me related to my womb, related to the fact that I'm a mother. But for another woman, it can be totally different. And it's the sum of all these singular experiences that makes a kind of global experiences out of which you can identify or not. And it's the same for men. And I think we're in a very weird and open field now where we can build culture and where the main thing is for people to be able to vocalize their singular experience that is fluid for some people, not fluid for others, but where we can say, that is my experience. And then that is what these men are doing, I think, in a very beautiful way, in a very noble way. That is not about the ego, it's just to have this open heart and be able to talk from that. And then the idea is not to target at men with these, but to really to bring a human experience. I identify to this man. I learn a lot about myself watching this man, and I'm a woman. But I think I lost the beginning of that sentence. But I think the main thing is to be able to talk from one singular perspective.
Thank you. Barbara, we talked earlier about how your plays, though they explore specific topics, I find that they really have much deeper philosophical underpinnings, and it's almost as if the action or the settings in the play themselves are are vehicles with which to talk about broader things. I wondered, you seem so inspired by this film. I wonder how it will impact how you write male characters going forward, and if it's had any kind of, change change your perspective, and what it's like being a woman writing male characters, and how this impacts.
I write a lot of male characters already, in a lot of my plays, and I think that I recognize in these men characters that are in the play that is about to come out in September. So I see. This is a good question actually. I scoured through the play and looked to see if there were any opportunities, because the guys in the play are play fighting a great deal of the time, and they're having they're a bunch of lads, and I looked to see if there were any opportunities to show a glint of what these guys are showing, so that we know that what we're watching the cover, but that we know we're getting a view of what's behind that as it goes through. So yeah, I did actually do that. So in the current work already, it's had its impact.
That's great, because it's important as creatives, right, to propagate, to help with those things rather than propagating stereotypes. I'm going to ask the whole panel one question, and then I think we're going to open it up to the audience, because I'm sure you guys have some questions for them. If we go down the line, I was curious what major cultural shift you would like to see. This is broad to say for humanity, it's a bit lofty, but what major cultural shift would you like to see for humanity coming out of this film? Like, I feel like it's very inspiring, and like we want, to change how men, express themselves. Is there, I guess it's a little bit the dream question of like, what would you love to see for the future?
Yes, I think I said it in the voiceover in the film. I'd like these not to be remarkable. I'd really like, for that to become more normalized, so that, and it is a pretty big, I doubt that I'll see it in my lifetime, although things, in the last century have changed at an extraordinary pace. But I think the view of what is masculine or what is a man is so archaic and so out of date that it needs a major upgrade. So if this film can in any way, help that happen, then it's been worth doing just for that.
doesn't have to be the film specifically just for you guys. It's just what you would like to see as a cultural shift. I mean, for you, that's fine, but for they don't feel... just so they don't feel completely boxed into the film is going to change the world.
Yeah, I think if culture can help people. I was reading a book made from a French journalist who journeyed all around the world, and she has been studying what she called root people. So it's tribes all over the world, and they all live along the
Root people?
Root people,
Okay.
yeah, peuple racine.
Yeah,
Root people, and she said they all live along the same 6 principles. So I can't remember all of them, but there is no disconnection between man and nature. We're all here to find our higher mission, things like that. And one of them is the tribe is meant to help individuals heal. And it's not the contrary. It's not for the individuals to feed the society they are living in. It's exactly the contrary. And I really hope we can contribute doing that.
Sebastian?
Yeah, so, I mean, just very briefly, I was asked by the New York Times to write an article about what it means to be a man today. And not a fraught topic at all. And I made the point that modern Western society is quite safe, and that the traditional role of a man as a protector is not entirely, but somewhat obsolete. So where does that leave all the men that aren't facing any dangers, right? And it's a really profound question. And we arrived at this point in society very, very recently. So what do we do? What do we do with that identity? And I said, the downside of modern mechanized mass society is it just tramples on human dignity. And if men want to convert that traditional role of protector of people, if they want to convert it to something that's updated for the modern situation, they can see themselves as the protectors of human dignity, whatever that may happen to mean. But I think we all know it when we see it. And that would be a proper use of one's masculinity. And the Times actually didn't, they refused to publish it. I mean, I think because of that, I was making a distinction. I think they're hoping that I would say there is no modern definition of manhood. It's an obsolete term. I think they were actually hoping I would say that. And I sort of doubled down on the idea. And so that was that.
Barbara?
There's the guy in the blue shirt in the movie with the bald head. When he said that he no longer judges anyone and that he used to have assumptions about people, I guess I would say that I would hope that people look twice at anyone that they see, because there's a lot of buried history, pain, joy, life in each one of us. And I think one of the things that's being destroyed or being gnawed away at by just this internet and the way things are communicated, that people aren't as nice because they're forgetting about the humanity in each one of us. So I think that would go a long way towards changing a lot of other things that are wrong with the society.
I think that's a beautiful way to end. So thank you so much for your thoughts. And now I'd like to open it up to questions, if you guys have any questions.
Hey, my name is Arthur Nelson. I'm emotionally exhausted from that film, so thank you. I actually just started a men's group in San Francisco, although I moved here for the summer, so kind of complicated. And I've run into so many fucking issues. It's mind-blowing, and it's both heartwarming and deeply sad at the same time. Sorry, my heart's gonna burst out of my chest. 2 questions, super quick, to the gentleman on the panel, but everybody else respond if you have stuff. I'm encountering so many issues with resistance with men wanting to engage. There's for every guy that shows up, there's 10 women that are how'd it go? I'm I wish there were more guys who cared. And then on rituals, that's actually something that my friend and I, who were co-hosting it, have been very deliberate about trying to almost design these experiences and design into them really simple, innocuous rituals to get people to open up and to have it be more intimate. But this is just us kind of pulling it out of the ether and out of our professional background. So I'd love to know from like science what works. Yeah, that's it.
10 years, give it 10 years. Seriously, I've got 4 groups that meet every other week. A lot of the guys in this have been in for 20 years. I think a group gels after 10 years. So it's time, man. It takes a long time.
Wait, there were 2 questions, right? One was, what is their ritual? And one, how do you get them to open up?
I'm not sure about ritual. It can have its place if everyone's feeling it. It can also be contrived and shallow. But what I would say is that when groups of people, male or female or mixed, it doesn't matter. But when groups of people go through things that are hard, they feel closer together and they're more honest. And barring an earthquake or something in San Francisco, I mean, just take them out into the mountains for a couple of days or something. Just make them hurt.
Give them a good ordeal.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Do Barbara and Mai have anything to say on that?
I would say just that if you have an overnight out and everyone, it doesn't have to be an ordeal, but if everyone sleeps in the same place and you wake up in the morning, there's a sense of family, even because you're fixing breakfast, you are vulnerable and sleeping in the same spot. And I found that like camping is or having people over to your apartment and having a sleepover. It's silly, but it's amazing how different you feel about it afterwards.
Can I just say, contact me, give me a shout. We can speak about it.
Hi. This is kind of like a multi-layered question. At the beginning of the film, I can't remember which one of the gentlemen in the group mentioned, I think the question was, how do you define manhood? How do you define being a man? And he couldn't give an answer. He was just like, I don't know how to define that. And on the panel, Jerry, I think was you who actually said it. You mentioned how other cultures, there are rite of passages where in these different communities, traditionally, they have to go through some sort of ordeal, some sort of challenge that really just helps a man or a young boy define himself as a man. We live in a westernized society, so we kind of live in a bubble. Do you think that absence of a rite of passage within our Western society makes it difficult for men that live here to actually answer that question?
I mean, it's a big question, isn't it? I think it's rites of passage in a ritualized sense, but it's also absent fathers. If you don't have a dad, it can be going fishing. It doesn't have to be getting nailed to a tree, But I mean, that works. But yeah, I mean, my dad was never around. I never went for a drink with him. I never went to the football with him. Those kind of, and I don't really like alcohol or football, but it doesn't matter. It's what that symbolizes. And I think someone said about this film a while ago, they don't seem to have as much to say about their fathers. Well, yeah, they're either dead or they weren't there, a lot of them. I mean, one guy stands out because he had a really close relationship with his dad, but then he died. So I think absent fathers is a compartment of the lack of rites of passage. Really, and it's what I said in the thing. I just want my dad to say, "Well done." That would do. It doesn't need to be a massive ordeal, as Barbara said, but just my dad going, "Yeah, I'm proud of you." That would have worked. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Can I answer something?
Yes.
Yeah, this film was also inspired by another film that you may have seen that's called The Work. The Work has been filmed in prison. So the guys are doing men's circle for 20 years now, and they do exactly the same thing, but adapted to prison. And every 6 months they do the work. So it's a 4-day kind of retreat. They go in a room where there are no guards, no security, nothing. And people from the outside, so guys like you, can come in and do the work with the prisoners. But the prisoners have done so much work on themselves that they will help the guys from the outside to free themselves. It's a very powerful thing, and that can be the kind of rite of passage. And at the end of the movie, it's not a spoiler because the film is an experience in itself. They all found out that they don't have fathers. So all the guys there, whether they are prisoners or outdoors, they're all searching for this parental figure that they don't have. So the two things can be gathered, this lack of fathers and this lack of rituals. It's a very confronting experience.
And no, I just have a follow-up to his question. I'm just to the left of him now. But so we don't really have a rite of passage on how to be a man, right? But I just want to get your ideas on the concept of the revocation of manhood, because I feel like manhood is always being challenged by other men. So women, we can understand that women enter womanhood through whether it's puberty or any other type of major event in their life. But for men, we don't really have that rite of passage, but it kind of contradicts that because men are still trying to tell you that, oh, you're not man enough or something like that, or you're a bitch or something like that. So how does that actually work, and what do you actually see in your line of work around that? So it's like the defense of manhood.
I mean, it's an interesting thing that I think that the men's groups that I run are essentially feminine, energetically. You know, I'm not talking about men and women. I'm talking about masculine and feminine as an energy. And if we're going to be reductionistic and simplistic for the sake of time, I think women, it's the feminine is more inclined to commune. Masculine is more inclined, especially when hurt, to isolate. So there's something about the feminine space that we create, and that's what I meant when I talked about breaking rules. And I think the sexist view of what is male is certainly perpetrated by men to men, and it doesn't take very much. You know, it takes a lot to get them in the room in the first place. I mean, I'm told, I'm not saying this as a boast, because English people don't do that. I'm told I've got probably the biggest men's group practice outside of the US, which sounds amazing, right? But it amounts to like 35 guys. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's a drop in the ocean, right? So men aren't doing this work in the UK. You know, so that, just give them the space. And these are primarily, these are all fee-paying guys. But when I've worked in prisons and I've worked in the judicial system, it makes no difference. You create a space, put a bunch of guys in a room, and they'll open up.
Just to add up with that, regarding what you've just said, I think that we're in a society where globally we don't grow, we don't help people grow. So there is nothing about that because there are very few adults there. So rite of passage is one thing. For women, we have our other cultural issues also to maintain the little girl in us and not grow and not burst out into an adult female figure or human. And for men, it's, you don't give them rite of passage, and they keep challenging each other, like in the courtyard, like as if the growing process has stopped in the courtyard, and it's the same repeating over and over because we haven't helped them grow, because it's not a societal need. I don't know.
There's a lot of little boys in men's suits.
Thank you very much. Jerry, how in the world did you get these people to speak to you? What was their initial reaction? How long did it take to get them to speak to you like this? It really is remarkable. And then for all of you, do you notice any difference in younger men and the millennial generation? Are things changing?
It took, well, it depends which way you look at it. It was kind of 20 years of pre-production. And then about 30 seconds for them to make their mind up. It's like, who's free on Saturday? That was it. But we've got 20-year experience of talking to each other. Some of these guys. So I mean, it's
Any differences in the younger generation?
I'm more. I don't know if I can speak for millennials, but it seems that on women's side, at least, they are much less. They are much more unapologetic. So they need much less permission to say whatever they want to say. So maybe we will have easier work with them to open up. The main thing is, again, for me, is the challenge is how to make them grow, how to make people grow, than how to make people express themselves.
I can give you a millennial look at it.
Yeah.
Even iGen, younger. Hi, I'm Julian. Something that really I found the film incredibly fascinating as like a young person who is growing up in a world where gender means so much less. And what really jumped out to me was that, like, introduced at the start of the film is that the pain, the suffering, the being, I don't know, I'll leave it at that. But that is all wrapped up in these ideas of masculinity, like capital M masculinity, capital M manhood. And we're taken through this beautiful journey of seeing them open up to what I thought was really great that you said was things that are seen as inherent, or I don't like that word, like typically seen as feminine or female. But then we come to the end of the film where they then box that back in to masculinity and manhood and double down on like reinventing the wheel, or not like repackaging the same idea when it seems really clear that like all of those systems and all of those ideas are what's hurting them in the first place. And just as someone who was raised by a completely queer family, I have 3 moms and 2 fathers, and was raised very much outside of what I think a lot of people instill gender norms in children. And I feel personally, I know this is getting long, feel personally that like all of the things that have really damaged me and hurt me in regards to gender have come from the outside of that. And I'm just wondering why there seems to be such a strong push to hold on to these things when it seems to be the source of the suffering and the pain.
Such a great question and interesting observation. Thank you.
To me, I don't have the pretension to have the answer. I think, again, the whole thing is to enable people to speak for themselves and not project onto society or whatever their ideas because they can't incarnate them. For some people, it's not interesting at all to journey onto the gender. For some people, it's really important. And I think also there is something generational where for some men, it's been such an anxiety not to be real men. So it's pointing onto something that is core to their identity, and they have to journey onto that. It doesn't mean that everyone is pulled and has to be pulled and has to have their own answers. But for people who do have questions about that, I think it's great if they have experiences where they can identify to that, where it's not masculinity is that, but okay, some men express themselves this way. And what about you? It's more an invitation, and I think culture is beautiful when it's inviting people into these experiences and not saying that, telling them what you should be.
But it's so interesting that may I ask how old you are? Right, so it's so, which is amazing. So I think it's very heartening to hear, like, someone say that it seems so, this whole masculine archetype is starting to become a moot point almost in the future, and I feel like that's a heartening.
Let me just add quickly though that so I'm a straight man, and like many straight men, I've tried to figure out what women like about men, right? Because if you can figure that out, when you're 20 years old or whatever, you can have more girlfriends. You can connect to women more successfully. And one of the things that women often like about men is their masculinity, their manness. And so the question, is it becoming obsolete? It will only, the gender question will only become obsolete when women's taste in men changes, right? And I'm not sure it will or should. But you can't really ask men to divorce themselves from societal expectations of manhood if women in their sexual selection don't do that as well, right? It's unfair. And I know you have something to say, but
that's entirely wrong, actually, and a really false way of looking at gender. Because I almost exclusively am sexually attracted to. Sorry, one second. Are exclusively attracted to women. I've been with men, but mostly my sexual encounters have been with women. And I don't say genderqueer a lot of the time because I think people of color, when they identify as genderqueer, it's so much more of a thing, and it's actually a privilege that I can exist in that space. I think that so many women out there are extremely attracted and find lack of masculinity beautiful and freeing because masculinity actually oppresses and takes away freedom, I feel like, from what I see and hear on an everyday basis from those women. And I think that separating from that masculinity is maybe the most powerful and freeing thing that we can do to forward freedom for women and men and people who don't fit onto a binary. Just got to say.
But it still depends on women letting go of that taste in men.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay. I mean, that's all I'm saying. Yeah.
It's but like women feeling that. I'm sorry, I'll be quiet. But women feeling that is also internalized sexism, internalized ideas about what they, like you were saying, like you felt like you thought, like you expected them to like take care of you or something. It's this feeling of I think I need this when inherently it doesn't mean anything.
But I think if masculinity or gender culture is really wrong today, it doesn't mean that we don't have to invent another kind of gender culture that is truly integrative, that is truly about inviting people to journey onto these things. But to me, in my journey, personally, I found it super empowering to encounter the woman in me, whatever it means for me. And it was super empowering to meet a man who has been journeying on his masculinity, whatever it means for him, and that fits. And it doesn't mean that his masculinity is what the traditional masculinity is. It's much more than that. It's more profound. But every individual has to do this journey if it's important for them. So.
Out of respect for our hosts at NeueHouse, I just have to let you know that we have time for 2 more questions. I see you in the back waving, but you've had the voice, so we're going to give it to this gentleman in the corner over here first. No? Okay. Well, you do, because we're recording. Yeah.
So I'm Brendan O'Byrne. Here's just some full circle stuff. I'm part of the Restrepo documentary that Sebastian made. And I've been...
Wow.
So I've been on this journey since coming home from Afghanistan to figure out what manhood means, right? Because I didn't feel like being I didn't feel any more of a man by doing what I did in Afghanistan. And that crater really represented something major, right? It represented the depth of violence that men are capable of. That crater could have been a mile deeper, and we're capable of that violence. But we're also capable of something much deeper than that. And the crater is also a crater of, the violence is the crater of love. Men are capable of that much love also. And what we are as a society truly is what we congratulate men for. What men are is what we congratulate them for. That's all men are. That's all men are, is what we congratulate them for. We build shrines, we build memorials, we build the best shrines to men who died at war. What about the compassionate, loving man, right? The men that died in war died because they love you. They love everyone. They loved even the bad, the side that the enemy loves also the people that they're fighting for. Just as much, not more than the people that they're fighting. So the question really is, for me, is, Sebastian, you said something about a friend. He said, one of your documentaries about Tim, who he lost. friend that you lost to war, who was trying to report on these major important things. And one of his friends said, he's talking to his grandfather about war, and he said, would you take it back? Would you do anything different, grandfather? Would you do anything different? And the grandfather said, no, because war is the only place that men can love each other unconditionally and not be judged for it. Now, the men's group, the remarkable men's group, is allowing men to love each other unconditionally and not be judged for it. It's not saying we have to redefine what manhood is, right? We don't have to redefine it. And it's not toxic if we don't allow it to be toxic. What we congratulate men for is what we will be. Men will be the thing you congratulate them for. Period, point blank, end of story. And every man that is good will fight against the people that take away that from that point. That's what war is. So my question is, do you think there's room in our society for that?
Yeah, I do. I think we watched it happen in this film. I think the society doesn't recognize this outwardly and overtly. I think it happens covertly. I think small-scale tribal societies are probably a lot better at making this kind of interaction between men overt and acknowledged. But we're a primitive society. We're getting there.
I think that I'm going to make an executive decision and end on that note because I think that was very powerful. Mai and Jerry and I think Sebastian and Barbara may linger for a few minutes outside, so if you have a few questions that we weren't able to answer here, they might have a little chat with you. I'd like to thank Paulette and NeueHouse for hosting us this evening. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank you all for coming and for your intelligent and articulate questions. And I'd like to thank everyone on the panel for their incredible input. And thank you both for this beautiful film. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of it in some small way.
Thank you, Mélissa.
Thank you.
Thank you.